I have a few minutes to kill. I think I'll look at Twitter. That's always a fun, positive experience.
12 seconds later.
I regret every decision I've ever made. Hi everyone, I'm Luna. Welcome to the Lunarium. So, last week I was scrolling through Twitter and I happened to see that a certain famous musician has been accused of abusing his exes. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, sometimes I kind of think my trauma goes looking for things that are going to be triggering. It's really hard to explain, but basically, I saw that one of his exes had posted allegations online, and then I went looking for more information when what I should have done is tried to not look at that because I should have known. And in some ways, I did know what was going to happen. But unfortunately, I listened to that self-destructive voice and I went and I looked and I found that some, news outlets had reported the story. And then I saw some of the comments that people had left in response to the story. And man, people are assholes. I don't understand it at all. But so many people had left comments where they were blaming the victims, saying they should have known better, all kinds of terrible things that I will not say. But seeing both the story and the way that people were defending the alleged abuser and blaming the victims really, really triggered me. I kind of spiraled that night into a really, really dark place. And to be honest, I haven't really been right since. I've had a lot of treatment and I've been taught a lot of coping skills to help me through exactly this kind of situation. But for whatever reason, I didn't think about any of them. So I decided to make this video both for anyone else who is looking for ways to help them cope when they get triggered, and also for myself as a reminder for the next time that this kind of situation comes up. First things first, I think it's necessary to define a trigger. I think a lot of people use trigger, especially because of how it gets used on social media. People say that someone's triggered when they mean annoyed or bothered. This has become a rather frustrating colloquialism. In mental health, a trigger is something that elicits an emotional response. And when it comes to PTSD, a trigger is something that causes someone's PTSD to flare up. I really wish that triggered didn't get used colloquially because it diminishes the importance of the mental health usage of the term trigger and triggered, because a trigger isn't just being annoyed or bothered by something. When it comes to PTSD, a trigger can cause an array of reactions, including flashbacks, panic attacks, dissociation. It's not just feeling bothered. Click the link above to watch my video where I talked about the importance of trigger warnings for just this reason. All right, so here is my list of coping skills that I have found helpful for when I'm dealing with a trigger in the PTSD sense. I do need to say that I am not a mental health professional and that this list is based off what I've learned in treatment and from my own lived experience. I'm hoping that people will find it helpful, but I don't want to pretend that I'm some kind of authority on the subject. Down below, I will link some resources if you want to learn more about coping with triggers or triggers in general. Also, everyone experiences triggers in different ways, and the degree to which you react to a trigger can vary a lot depending on the circumstances or, how you're doing outside of experiencing that trigger. So some coping skills are just not going to work for some people the way that they work for others. And also maybe at times some coping skills will work better for you than they will at others. So I do encourage you to try multiple things. All right. So skill number 1 is to activate your 5 senses. Activating your senses can help to ground you and make you actually feel like you're in your body. So I think it can be incredibly helpful to grab something that smells good, a candle, a flower, warm cookies. Grab a bite of something you find delicious. Maybe those aforementioned chocolate chip cookies, something delicious to drink. And also touch is incredibly important. If you have a pet, give it a hug.
Let me hug you, it's for my mental health.
If someone's around you, hug them. You can, squeeze a pillow. Anything that's going to make you actually feel that you're in your body is going to be very helpful. I found a tip on NAMI's website where they say use your 5 senses and do it in a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. So basically you start and you say, I'm going to list 5 things that I see, 5 things that I smell, taste, touch, and hear. And then you go down to 4. Now here are 4 things that I see, touch, taste, smell, and hear. And you go all the way down until 1. And by doing that, you are kind of combining the using your senses technique with the coping skill that I'm about to list, which is find an exercise for your brain. Sometimes just having something else to think about can help pull you back. So anything like reciting the alphabet backwards, or counting all the ceiling tiles, or listing off every item you see around you that's red. Basically, just anything that's going to occupy your brain so that you're not focusing on the traumatizing memories. The next coping skill is kind of an extension of the 5 senses, which is to take a shower or a bath. Nothing's going to make you feel in your body more than a really cold shower or bath, but I would recommend a hot one. It's going to feel much nicer, and also you're going to be able to be in it longer. Having a shower or a bath is going to be a really effective way of making you really feel like you're in your body. Another coping skill that I find very helpful, particularly when I'm having a panic attack or I'm approaching a panic attack, is to place something cold on one of your pulse points. So I find it really helpful. Grab a cup of cold ice water and put it on your wrist. And this is something that you can do pretty much anywhere. And it doesn't, it looks pretty subtle. But just by doing that, you kind of slow your body down, and it really makes you feel like you're in the moment. Another important coping skill is deep breathing. I know it doesn't sound like that much. You breathe all the time. But again, deep breathing can be a really important grounding technique and can also help slow down your pulse and really connect you to your body. When you are deep breathing, you should be breathing in through your nose and out through either your nose or pursed lips. And it's also helpful if you're breathing at a steady pace and if you're inhaling for shorter than you're exhaling. This helps activate the part of your nervous system that's responsible for calming you down. So, for example, you can breathe on a 4-2-6 rhythm. So, inhale on 4, hold for 2, exhale on 6. And then you go again. Sometimes when I'm approaching a panic attack or in full panic attack, it feels impossible for me to direct myself to breathe in a controlled manner. So I found it really helpful to have someone there who's telling me, breathe in, breathe out, I know that that's not always something that the people around you are going to know to do. So I recorded a short video where I am leading the same kind of counted breathing that we just went over. So if you're ever in a situation where you could use someone leading you through slow counted breathing, it will be there. You can put it on a loop, and I hope that you might find that helpful. Again, the important part is that you're breathing in through your nose, you're breathing out through your nose or pursed lips, and you're having slow, constant breathing where you're exhaling for longer than you're inhaling. Another coping skill is a progressive muscle relaxation exercise. The way this works is that you are going to tense and then release muscle groups starting at your toes and going all the way up to your head. So, for example, you're going to take your toes and you're going to tighten them. You can't see my toes, but I promise I'm doing it. And then you release. And then you go to your feet, tighten, and release. And then go to your calves, and you get the idea. Basically, this can be very helpful if, again, you're feeling disconnected from your body. If you're panicking, it can help you to kind of have some, increased tension, but then relax. And it is just a generally good way to calm down when you're feeling anxious. Something that I know isn't always possible is to ask someone to keep you company, whether that's actually in person or virtually. It can be really helpful to have someone there to keep you connected to the present, and also just to, help you breathe, just to be there and remind you that you're not alone. Obviously, this should be someone who you feel safe around, someone who's going to be empathetic and understanding, and who you ideally have talked to about being there for you in this kind of situation. Also, if you have a therapist and they've told you that you can reach out to them anytime that you need them, you should try and give them a call. And also remember that you can always call a suicide prevention hotline or a warm line, which is for when you're struggling but not suicidal. And there are volunteers who are there to talk to you if you need them. Another coping skill that's useful for intrusive thoughts or when you're ruminating is to not be in silence. I know that I, for example, need to have a show running a lot of the time, especially when I'm falling asleep. I recommend that this is a show that you've seen before, so you're not watching it for the plot, but it's just background noise. And also that it's something that makes you happy and isn't going to trigger you even more, which is another reason why it's important that it's something that you've seen before. I know that it's not great sleep hygiene to go to sleep with TV on and a show running, but sometimes when you're living with PTSD, you have to just figure out whatever it is that you need to do in order to just get sleep in the first place or to feel like you can get through your day. Ideally, this is something that you wean yourself off of over time. Like, I can now often take showers without having something playing in the background, whereas only a few years ago, I absolutely could not. If you're not a show person, maybe a podcast, maybe music. I personally find music fades into the background of my mind too easily, and I'm able to ruminate even though music is playing, which is why it's helpful for me to have something where people are actually speaking, but whatever works for you. Another coping skill is to think positively. I know that sounds cheesy and vague, but basically think about something that makes you feel happy and hopeful. Like for me, it's holding my cat or when she's purring on my chest. You stop, close your eyes, and just think about whatever it is that's going to just make you feel some warmth. And you sit with that feeling for at least 12 seconds and really try and block out anything else and just focus on that positive thing. And then once 12 seconds have passed, you notice if there's any changes in how you feel. If you find yourself not needing to be in a defensive position, if you can breathe a little better. Another coping skill you can use is to journal. It can really help make you feel like you're not at the whims of your memories or flashbacks or ruminations if instead of just feeling them, you put them down onto paper. This can also be especially helpful if you do it in the third person instead of the first person. So instead of, me writing, I am feeling really triggered after seeing a story on social media, I would write, Luna is feeling really triggered after seeing a story on social media. Writing in third person instead of first person can put some distance between you and what you're feeling and, some of the events that you might be remembering that caused you to have trauma in the first place. And it can be easier to write about it when you're doing it in a way that isn't reliving that experience. Another coping skill is to validate yourself. Try and tell yourself that there's nothing wrong with how you are responding to a trigger. The fact that your body responds to some stimuli in such an extreme way has to do with your defense mechanisms that were built up when you experienced trauma. There's nothing wrong with you. You are just traumatized. I know that for me, blaming myself for how I feel and how I respond is a big part of what keeps me feeling triggered and prevents me from doing things that are going to make me feel better. So the more that you can validate yourself and not blame yourself, the better. Now that I've listed a few coping skills, I just want to remind you that it's really important that you take care of yourself even when you're coping with triggers, especially when you're coping with triggers. You're going to have a much harder time coping with trauma and stress if you aren't taking care of your body. So generally, you should be making sure that you're getting enough sleep. I know that can be really hard with PTSD, that you're eating well, you're getting regular exercise. Obviously, you should continue those things even when you're feeling triggered because your needs continue to be important even if you're feeling disconnected from your body, even if you're having a flashback or panic attack. I know it can feel impossible in those times to take care of some of your more basic needs, but remember that as much as you can, you should try to. And especially it's important when you are coping with a trigger to avoid mind-altering substances, alcohol, drugs. It can be tempting to get some relief that way, but in the long term, this is going to make coping with triggers a lot harder. Using mind-altering substances as a coping skill for being triggered could also lead to an addiction, which is only going to make things worse. And also, there is the possibility that the chemical could combine with your trigger to not make you feel better, but to make you feel worse. Another thing that's really important to keep in mind is the fact that if your trigger has come up because of something that happened, in the news, something that people are talking about on social media, that means that you should avoid the news and social media as much as you can for a few days. And I know that can be hard to do, and for some people, their careers make that impossible, but to whatever degree that you can, you should try and avoid being exposed to triggering material. Okay, everyone, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have other tips for how people can cope when they're feeling triggered, please leave them in the comments down below. In the video description, I've linked a video where I lead you through the slow counted breathing that we talked about earlier. And I've also linked a video where I guide you through a progressive muscle relaxation. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel and it would really, really help me out a lot. Please take care of yourselves. Until next time, bye.